Hello everyone, I'm Wayne Syme, CEO of ALPS, and I would like to welcome you to our first ever virtual conference and awards. In light of the current situation, it is regrettable that we are not able to meet face-to-face this year, but I hope that you will find our virtual alternative enjoyable, useful, and informative. In this first session, we'll hear from all of our award finalists, who will each give a short presentation and will be hosted by our awards chair, David Summer. Before I hand over, I would just like to run through some housekeeping. Audio will be streaming via Zoom through your computer speakers or headset, and all attendees will be in listen-only mode. If you've joined through your computer audio and are having difficulties, click the microphone on your toolbar, disconnect from the computer audio, and dial into the webinar using one of the phone numbers from your reminder emails. All sessions will be recorded for video and audio purposes and will be freely available via our media platform hosted by Cadamore Media, so you can catch up with sessions you miss or want to revisit. The content will include full transcripts that are searchable and closed captioned, as well as being tagged with relevant metadata to make finding and sharing clips with colleagues and contacts easy. Look out for more updates on this and the link to the dedicated site soon. I want to give a huge thanks to our sponsors who have supported us by funding this conference following our decision to cancel the event in Manchester, and in particular to PLS, who are sponsors of the awards sessions. We are delighted to be starting the conference with these lightning sessions, and so without further delay, I would like to introduce our chair, David Summer. David is Chief Product Officer and co-founder of Kudos, the service for researchers, institutions and publishers to help maximize the impact of published work. David has over 25 years of experience in the global publishing industry and is actively involved in standards development and chairs the Counter-Executive Committee, which creates and manages standards for use of datage. David regularly chairs and speaks at industrial events and also serves on committees within ALPS and UKSG. David, it's over to you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Wayne, and welcome to everybody, and good afternoon to the ALPS Innovation Awards session. So as Wayne said, I'm David Summer, I'm chair of the awards, and I really want to thank everybody for being here this afternoon. I can see we've got quite a lot of people online joining us, and thanks also to Chloe from CCC, who's been assisting with all the virtual side of making this all work. So obviously things are very different this year, but despite the whole world having been turned upside down, it has actually been a great year for the ALPS Awards. We've had almost 40 entries, which is impressive considering what everybody has been dealing with and is comparable with the number of entries we've had for previous years. With each of our applications, we ask for a short statement of innovation, which is a brief summary of the key innovative elements of each product, service, and project. And again, this year we published all of those statements of innovation in full on the ALPS website, so they're all there for you to read. We've also this year done a spotlight blog post for each of our finalists, so do take a look at the blog when you get a moment. I'd like to just take a moment to acknowledge our amazing panel of judges. We have 10 members of our judging panel, which represents publishers, vendors, libraries, consultants, standards bodies, and includes people from the UK, Europe, and from the United States as well. And each of these judges give 3 to 4 days of their time to independently read through all of the applications, evaluate them, score them, question them, meet up to agree a shortlist, and then go to the presentations for the finalists. And I must say that the quality and the rigor that goes into that process is outstanding. So thank you once again to our judges. So this year we have 8 finalists, and you're now going to hear a short 10-minute overview from each of them. So I'll briefly say a word of introduction about each now. This is the order in which they'll present. So in a moment, we're going to hear from Word to EPUB from the DAISY Consortium, which is a free tool to help create EPUB publications with built-in accessibility features, and Richard Orme will talk about that in a moment. Then we'll hear from Charlesworth WeChat Gateway, which provides STM publishers with the ability to integrate their systems with WeChat to support Chinese authors. So we'll hear from Andrew Smith and Helen Tian presenting on that. Then it's Select Crowd Review, which is an interactive and safe way to improve the quality and speed of publishing using the mechanisms of social media, and Sue Hodgson will be presenting that. Then we have Open Library of Humanities, which is a sustainable scholar-led consortia funding model for gold open access in the humanities without publication fees, and Martin Paul-Eve will be presenting that. Then we'll be halfway. Then it'll be scholarcy, which applies machine learning to extract structured data and knowledge summaries from scholarly content to help reduce information overload. So Emma Warren-Jones and Phil Gooch will be presenting that. Then DataSeer are up, which guides researchers through the data sharing process for their manuscripts, allowing journals and funders to have consistent and enforceable data sharing policies. And Tim Vines will present that. Then we'll hear from Jus Mundi, which is a multilingual search engine for international law, and that provides legal researchers worldwide with an innovative way to build comprehensive international legal knowledge. And Jean-Rémy Demestre will be presenting that. And then finally, we'll hear from Rigor and Transparency Index, powered by SciScore, which is an automated reviewer scoring over 1 million papers and detecting which of the rigor and transparency criteria have been addressed. And that'll be presented by Anita Bandrowski and Martijn Rosland. So many congratulations to all 8 on being shortlisted. The standard again this year has been very high. So to be shortlisted and to be a finalist is a great achievement. We do have a lot to get through over the next 7.5 hours. No, only kidding, it's about an hour and a half. Each one will have 10 minutes and I'll remind speakers to switch on their video and share their screen before they present. So without further ado, let's get started. And first up this afternoon is Word to EPUB from the DAISY Consortia. So Richard Orme, over to you. The floor is yours.
David, thank you very much. And hello, everyone. Welcome to this set of lightning presentations. And I'm delighted to present to you the innovation from the DAISY Consortium, which is a non-profit organization based out of Zurich in Switzerland, but with partners worldwide, that's all around access to published materials for people with print disabilities. And so I thought it would be good to start with, just in a nutshell, explaining what we're setting to achieve with this innovation. Now, the digital publishing industry has developed this format called EPUB, which is based on web technologies and including those such as HTML and CSS that you'll be familiar with. And that's because people need to read digital books on all sorts of different devices, whether that's a large screen laptop or computer, right down to a smartphone with a small screen, maybe reading on the train. And this really exposes one of the great features of EPUB, which is that it's responsive and reflowable. And this makes it great for reading on a device like a phone, but also just superb for people with low vision and other reading challenges where making the text larger and changing the way it's displayed is important to them. And just like on the web, because it's based on web technologies, it has accessibility standards. So there's great support from assistive technologies like screen readers, dyslexia support tools, and so on. But the software to actually create EPUBs can be specialist and complex. It's used by so many big publishing organizations. And if you're reading ebooks, you're probably reading books that have been created as EPUBs, but they're using specialist proprietary software solutions. So Word to EPUB, it solves this challenge by making it really simple to create great EPUB publications from Word documents. I want to say a little bit about the inspiration for this tool. The first person featured on this slide is Amy Mason, and Amy presented a paper at a conference at the California State University Northridge Conference, which was because she was trying to create an accessible file for herself. She wanted to explore different ways of doing that, and she really couldn't find a solution that was easy for her to use as a blind person. The second person featured, and that I want to focus on, is the lady on the second photo here, and this is my wife, so I probably should have mentioned her first. She's pictured here with Richard Stevens, her co-editor of a journal for Springer Nature. And the articles that go into that publishing system all benefit from a sophisticated workflow and published as HTML, EPUB, and PDF. But when I asked Sophie how she produced papers and learning materials for her students at Warwick University, she said she didn't know, and whatever, it would need to be really drop dead simple. And this was true for her fellow lecturers as well. And thirdly, I want to mention Douglas Onweba, who is an assistive technology instructor at Enable. And he's using Word to EPUB to solve some of the challenges that face disabled students in his country of Kenya. So let me do a really quick demonstration of this tool. I'm going to drop down into Word. And I'm just in a regular Word document here. This is actually a paper written by my wife. Up on the toolbar here, I've got an item on the ribbon, which is Word to EPUB. This starts a little app plugin, and I can change things like the file name. There's all sorts of advanced features for playing around with the cover and so on. But for someone who wants a simple solution, they just need to click OK. It generates the EPUB for them, does all sorts of fancy things under the hood, including creating a cover image, marking up maths, providing a great table of contents, dealing with all the correct semantic markup and so on. And at the end of that, I can just drop in and have a look at that EPUB. I'm opening this in a Windows desktop version of an EPUB reader called Thorium. And because it's an EPUB reader, I'm able to do fancy things like navigate through the table of contents and change the presentation. These are the sorts of things that people really love about EPUB, such as the ability to change the font and the font size with all the reflow and all these sorts of things too. So back to the presentation. That EPUB I created could work anywhere. I've just created it on a Windows computer, and there's a screenshot of that, but I could also be reading it on my smartphone with all the visual adjustments for it. So some of the features of Word to EPUB is that it builds in all that navigation based on the markup within the XML of the Word document. So the table of contents, page number navigation, endnotes, internal, external links. It builds in all the semantics that are so important for someone who's using, for example, a screen reader, so that it's not just text. There are numbered and bulleted lists. They know when they're entering into a quote or an aside, where there are context transitions, and there is semantic markup in lines such as strong and highlighted text and citations and so on. Further, for accessibility, images have alt text or they're marked as decorative. There are fully navigable tables. The language is marked up, so if it switches from, say, German to Italian, the screen reader or read aloud feature will automatically switch the language it's reading in. It's got great markup for math, low vision friendly font options, and many other features too. So let's explore some use cases for Word to EPUB. So it could be universities creating digital resources that follow universal design for learning principles. So here I'd think about the University of California in Berkeley, California, where they're creating resources and making them available to all their learners, and those with and without disabilities are using the same file in the way they want to read. It could be self-publishing authors who are working from Word manuscripts and then distributing from their own website or blog. A great web use case that has emerged is non-profit organizations in developing countries that are making education and academic materials available to people with print disabilities. They're using that great workflow of Word and then Word to EPUB to really easily make accessible versions of school books for learners with print disabilities. This has been a complicated tool chain for them previously. Now it's so simple. And another use case could be you. I'm sure we've got a very diverse audience attending this webinar, so you could grab your own copy at daisy.org/Word to EPUB. It's free to use and free to download, of course. Here's an image of some colleagues at a blindness organization in Nigeria, and here blind people are making books for blind people, scanning, marking up in Word, proofreading and editing, and then creating the EPUB files from there. And print students who are struggling to access those printed resources are also able to access them if the rights holders' needs are taken into account. So where are we going with this tool? Well, we're building in additional languages for localization. Currently, it's available in many different languages, including English, Portuguese, Spanish, French, German, Italian, but we're moving into Russian and Arabic and so on, although materials are being produced in many, many different languages. Education materials are being produced in developing countries, and we see improved support for math expressions being something that's on the roadmap as well. So that's the presentation of our tool. I just want to acknowledge all the support we've had from people from all over the world. I mentioned some of those folk who've inspired the tool in the first place. Here's just a range of people from India and France and Canada, Brazil, Egypt, Slovenia, who have contributed with translations and bug reports and feature requests and so on. So thanks to them, thanks to the panel of judges, and thanks to all of you for your attention for this lightning presentation. That's it from me.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Richard. And I think you get triple acknowledgement there: 1 for keeping to time, 2 for wearing a branded shirt, and 3 for having the courage to do a live demo, which I know takes something. So very well done, thank you. Okay, so next up then is Charlesworth WeChat Gateway, and this is actually going to be a recorded presentation. So I'll now hand over to Andrew Smith and Helen Tian.
Hello, everyone. This is Helen Tian. I'm the General Manager for Charlesworth China.
Hello, I'm Andrew Smith, and I'm the Product and Marketing Director here at Charlesworth in the UK.
It's very nice to have this opportunity to present the Charlesworth WeChat Gateway to you. So Charlesworth has been operating in China for more than 20 years. And during that time, we have worked very closely with the Chinese academics and librarians based in the research institutions across the country. This has been given us a deep understanding about the academic environment and also how researchers are communicating and collaborating with each other. As you may notice, China is one of the largest scientific articles producers. However, Chinese authors, they often struggle with some issues during their scientific publication processes. For example, the current publishing platforms, they are using English language as the user interfaces. And Chinese researchers, they're also facing speed and connectivity issues due to the Chinese firewall. And for some publication functionalities, there are lack of the mobile adaptation and optimization in some cases. Currently, a lot of publishers, they are also using email as the main method of communication with researchers and authors in China. However, in China, we already become a mobile-first market, where messaging apps are actually dominating the daily communication. So in summary, email communication and constantly logging into West-based websites, it doesn't offer a China-based author the good experience they're used to when they're doing the buying, they're doing the e-commerce or managing other types of the service in China. The WeChat Gateway is able to solve this problem by allowing the publishers to easily build up the better author experiences for their Chinese authors through WeChat. So now, why WeChat? There are so many different types of social media in China, but WeChat is truly a super app that delivers a breadth of the functionalities, which is not available through any single social media app in the Western world. Here are some statistics that are demonstrating the importance of WeChat in China. There is more than 1.15 billion monthly active users, and they are spending 82 minutes every day on WeChat. 83% of the WeChat users, they are using WeChat for their work and also for their research collaboration. The Chinese way of doing business is a bit more informal in some ways than in the Western world. The line between personal communication and business communication is far more blurred. So both interactions are taking place simultaneously in WeChat. Academics, they are regularly using WeChat in their work when they're communicating with their peers, their colleagues. And they are also actively participating in different academic groups in WeChat, where they can share information about scientific findings, they can share the conference information, and they can discuss the scientific papers.
Thanks, Helen. So the Charlesworth WeChat Gateway allows a publisher to create a great user experience for China-based authors. And it allows them to have received messages from third-party systems and also to ask questions and interrogate information about those systems without having to constantly log into different systems outside of China. So if we take a look at the diagram here, on the one side you've got WeChat and the publisher WeChat accounts, and then really in the middle that drives this experience is the Charlesworth WeChat Gateway. We have servers in both China and Europe, and this allows us to synchronize across the Chinese firewall to reduce down time delays, timeout issues, and make sure that this experience is fairly seamless and quick. Now, we integrate with a number of third-party systems with Aries Editorial Manager, Dove Content Reactor, and our own system, and many others are currently within the pipeline. Now, messages can move between these systems through the gateway. Within the gateway, we have chatbot technology that allows us to configure messages and then to send messages back through to WeChat in Chinese or slightly tailored messages configured from the gateway. So the key thing here is you don't need a development team to manage this. This can all be done by a marketing or publishing team. Messages can be changed, can be configured, can be set up in different ways. And this is all responsibility of the publisher, who is able to do this really at the center using the gateway to configure. So let's take a look at the different product options available. As I mentioned, you can integrate a third-party system through the gateway, and that provides those two-way messages between WeChat and the publisher system. There's a marketing center that also allows you to post content and manage your WeChat account and configure automated replies. We offer detailed analytics through our dashboard that help you track KPIs, return on investment, and really understand who's using your account and what that engagement looks like, what the results of your marketing campaigns may have been. And then there's also a customer service center that gives you a full audit of all messages passing through the gateway, including those undertaken by your human customer service element. So let's look at how this all comes together then for the author. So what this does is it drives engagement with your WeChat accounts and it drives your brand in China. So through adding push notifications from a submission system, what you're doing is pushing the author back into WeChat. They're then going through to your WeChat account to read those notifications. But while there, they can also be marketed to. You can create engaging content, you can create mini apps, you can keep the user going back into your WeChat account and into different parts of content about your publisher that's then driving that brand engagement and creating future submissions. And it's not just submissions, the submission use case that we can do here. We can also look at post submission. So you could send messages through around citations, around usage, different information that's getting the user back into WeChat, back into your content, and is thinking about your brand in a really positive way. Now I'll move quickly over to our account where we've already set up the author submission use case. So if you submit to Charlesworth Author Services, you can select the turnaround time for your paper, but then you can track your paper throughout the process. There's a one-time login, which you can see here on the screen. But after that, at any point, day or night, you can simply put in your paper number, and then you can understand exactly where your paper is in that process. So here we go. If we just put a paper number in, and what you can see is a message that will get returned back from the gateway. And these messages, as I mentioned, can all be configured in the gateway and tailored to publisher needs. Now, if we kind of turn around to the other side, I'll quickly show you the dashboard. So this is a tool whereby, as a publisher, you have a single portal. You don't need to worry about the WeChat backend at all. You can log in to the Charlesworth WeChat Gateway portal. You can access all the information about your followers. You can understand exactly what type of engagement is taking place. And if we can scroll along the top here, what we can do is go to the area whereby the journal status inquiry, which is where the messages are that are passed to and from a system through to an author. And we can simply change the dates here. You can export this as a CSV file. But then you can look at what engagement's taking place. And then you can look at this against your article submissions, against your marketing activity. And you can understand where has the impact been, how much time is this saving you, what the benefit for your authors is. So just to take a brief look at the roadmap, we're constantly evolving the Charlesworth WeChat Gateway. The Aries Editorial Manager integration goes live later on this year. We're also in active discussions and proposal stage with publishers looking to integrate different use cases other than submissions, and we expect to be rolling those out later on this year. We're also constantly improving our marketing center for that to really be a single portal to manage WeChat and other Chinese social media platforms. We're adding auto translate into our customer service area, so those audit messages can all be translated into English. We're improving our chatbot to offer voice recognition, and we're adding the Japanese social networking service Line in as well, so that you could offer this service in Japan.
It's a great pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, and thank you very much to Andrew and Helen from Charlesworth WeChat Gateway. Okay, so next up then is Select Crowd Review, and Sue Hodgson is going to talk to that. So Sue, over to you.
Thank you, David. Okay, hello everyone. I'm Sue Hodgson, responsible for TEMA's chemistry publishing, and I'm going to present TEMA's collaboration with FileStage, Select Crowd Review. As publishers, you're all aware of the drawbacks of traditional peer review. It's time-consuming for editors, reviewers and authors, it is often slow, and the results may be of questionable quality. The system's frustrating when a key author requirement is to have their paper published as quickly as possible. It puts an additional burden on the publishing house. We have little ability to influence the speed of the process whilst receiving the blame for the failings. In addition, many authors feel that traditional peer review, is open to bias. I'm sure many of you have felt frustrated with traditional peer review at times and wish there was an alternative, a better option. Well, now there is, Select Crowd Review. I'll explain how Select Crowd Review offers a quality peer review service, which is twice as fast, at least twice as fast, as traditional peer reviewing. I'll explain how it reduces bias and increases quality and speed. Instead of relying on 2 or 3 individuals, the reviewing needs are collected from an always available crowd. This crowd is a closed list. It's made up of around 50 to 100 hand-picked individuals from around the world, and it's selected and regularly updated by the journal's editor-in-chief. They interact together in an anonymous and highly secure environment. A paper comes in. The crowd review manager posts it. Reviewers who choose to have between 48 and 72 hours to proactively review in part or in full, so they decide if they have enough time, and they decide if their expertise matches the paper. So the whole thing is completely self-selecting and a total flip for the current peer review process. We find that open sharing of the anonymous comments with the rest of the crowd increases caliber of recommendations and also creates an element of quality control by the crowd. At the end of this whole process, the editor evaluates feedback, decides whether to accept or reject the paper, and forwards the feedback to the author for consideration. So this process combines the benefits of social media communication, such as real-time commenting, with excellence, because we have only experts in the crowd, we have the highest security standards, and the whole process is actively managed by a dedicated editor. And here's a shot of the actual system. You can see here on the left-hand side comments from the crowd members, and they all have anonymous numbers. Otherwise, their identity is not revealed. And each of these dots are comments from the crowd. And this dot here with a circle around it is where a crowd member has actually made a comment on somebody else's comment. Classical peer review puts a lot of pressure on reviewers because it's down to them how fast or how slow the review process is. But with Select Crowd Review, this work is shared with others. On average, we have 7 reviewers for each paper. So crowd reviewing is less time consuming for reviewers because their comments build on each other's and they're not made in isolation. Crowd review is a group effort and it's more effective because we're leveraging the knowledge of many. The review process is at least twice as fast with Select Crowd Review than with traditional peer review, and we receive on average 22 comments as opposed to 4 in traditional peer review. So in TEMA Chemistry, our peer review takes around 10 days, and with Select Crowd Review we can reduce this to 5 days, but in other parts of TEMA, peer review takes longer than 10 days, so this really is a substantial time saving. We've experimented by offering Select Crowd Review as an opt-in service. So when an author submits to us, they can choose to either have classic peer review, Select Crowd Review, or both for their papers. And we've gathered data over the years to see how people respond to this offer. And what we've found is that in our most recent deployment in medicine, over 60% of our authors chose Select Crowd Review. So not only does Select Crowd Review offer significant improvement in all KPIs of the peer reviewing process, speed, quality, and inclusion, it also has demonstrated market acceptance. We've had some very nice feedback on Select Crowd Review. For example, Nature commented that the crowd was much faster and provided much more comprehensive feedback than traditional peer review. Chemistry World commented that editorial decisions could be made in a fraction of the time it normally takes to organise peer review. And Scientific American talked about the efficiency of the process because no invitations need to be issued. The whole thing is completely self-selecting, and once the crowd is set up, the reviewers automatically sign themselves up and add comments in their own time. In fact, the conditions for success of Select Crowd Review are very simple. All you need is a good editor-in-chief to sign up the crowd and a scope that's selective enough that a crowd of 50 to 100 people can cover it. And even then, if the field is too broad or the copy flow too significant, the whole system scales beautifully to accommodate subcrowds to avoid burdening reviewers with too many papers or with papers outside their expertise. I'm sure you may be wondering about the future plans for Select Crowd Review and how we think it can develop. So, in terms of scale, we are rolling it out to our entire portfolio of Team of Science journals, with a plan to have this in place by the end of the year. We deliberately chose to develop Select Crowd Review with an external provider, FileStage. They're the sole owner of the product, and this is to help ensure full independence from any publishing house. FileStage are a startup based in Stuttgart, Germany. They have already started providing this service to another publisher, Emerald, and discussions are also underway with several other key publishers for a rollout later this year, which is really exciting. Our plans for product development, of course, they're iterative. So most recent deployment, we've enabled real-time collaboration on the platform. The next two things on our to-do list are to integrate Select Crowd Review with manuscript submission platforms such as Editorial Manager and Scholar One. The other thing we're planning to do is integrate with Publons and Scopus so it's easier for editors-in-chief to recruit specific subject matter experts to their crowds. So, to sum up our idea, since the first ever peer-reviewed journal launched in 1731, peer review methodology has pretty much remained unchanged. Select Crowd Review is shaking that model up by leveraging a key driver of digital disruption, the power of the crowd, in a simple yet modern and very innovative way. So the results of Select Crowd Review are faster reviews, quicker publications, which equals happier authors and hopefully more submissions. Higher quality, you'll remember we get on average 22 comments for the review process of a paper. Reduce workload for reviewers because on average we have 7 people reviewing each paper, and increase diversity and inclusion because we can structure a crowd of 50 to 100 people to ensure that we have diverse and inclusive perspectives in it. You're going to see many presentations in this lightning session. If you remember one thing about ours, it's that our solution offers an inclusive and quality peer reviewing experience, which is at least twice as fast as traditional peer review. Thank you very much for your time and for your interest. If you'd like to know more about Select Crowd Review, here are some contact details. Myself, Sue Hodgson, my colleague Daniel Schiff, who's a Senior Vice President at TEMA and the product owner of Select Crowd Review, and our partner, Nicholas Dawn, who's the CEO and founder of FileStage. Thanks very much.
That's great, Sue. Thank you very much. We will indeed remember that, that fact. Thank you. Right, next up then is Open Library of Humanities, and over to Martin Paul Eve, who's going to present that. So over to you, Martin.
Thank you very much, David. I hope I'm coming through loud and clear here. My name is Martin Paul Eve, and I'm Professor of Literature, Technology and Publishing at Birkbeck, one of the colleges of the University of London. I'm going to talk to you today about the Open Library of Humanities, which is a project that was founded in idea 7 years ago, came to reality 5 years ago, and has really come to maturity this year. And really, it arose in response to increasing numbers of international mandates for open access publishing across all disciplines, but mandates that were enacted on the supposition that the economic model for publication in all disciplines would support an article processing charge model. In fact, it's been a great disappointment to me that the discourse in policy around open access publication has focused so clearly on a business model that may work well for the natural sciences, but that works terribly when you get outside those disciplines where project funding is available. Put simply, while a physicist may be able to find £1,800 per article they publish, most of my colleagues would be laughed out of the Dean's office if they tried to request that volume of funding for a single publication. We decided that we needed a radical approach to the economics of scholarly communication if we were going to achieve open access in an equitable way in the humanities disciplines. And that's why we founded the Open Library of Humanities and its novel economic model that I'm going to tell you about today. So I just wanted to start with a few growth figures. So one of the questions we were asked on the judging panel about this initiative was, well, are you really an innovation anymore? You've been going 5 years. And the response I had to give was that for some people, 5 years is a long time in innovation terms and everything has changed. But for others, we're not yet old enough to be taken as an example of what you can achieve. But what I would say is that in the first 5 years, we've achieved an extraordinary level of growth for a small scholar-led humanities publisher. We've gone from 0 to 28 journals over that period. So we're the same size as a small to medium university press. We have 300 library members who've joined our membership platform that I'm going to tell you about. And we've also built a new journal management software platform from scratch that is in use by universities and publishing houses across the world, including Carnegie Mellon University, who use it for their Encyclopedia of Science. We use it on our own platform, and University of Huddersfield Press use it for their books platform, for example. So we've already seen the spread of our initiative. But really, fundamentally, what innovation we're talking about here is to reverse the traditional thinking about subscription models. In a traditional economic model for scholarly communications, we have a subscription system where many libraries around the world all pay medium sums into a central pot so that they can exclusively receive access to a journal's outputs every year. The typical article processing charge model for open access publication turns that on its head and says, okay, instead of the readers paying, we will require the author to pay. But that obviously has the problem of concentrating the costs on one place in the system. Subscriptions do a great job at distributing economic input across many actors. Article processing charges concentrate those costs on one point. We said to libraries, what if we have a mechanism that looks like a subscription, but we let anyone read the work anyway? In that way, we'll achieve this economic distribution that we've seen in subscription systems, while at the same time allowing anybody to read it, which is what libraries have been saying they want for the last decade. It's what the funders have been telling us they want, and we'll never have to charge authors that article processing charge. We'll even give you, libraries, we said, a governance stake in this platform so that you can decide when new titles come on board whether you want to support the concomitant price rise that will go with that. There were precedents for this model. Archive, for instance, based at Cornell University is probably the foremost example of this, where in high energy physics, they are supported by the universities that most use their platform. Knowledge Unlatched, at the same time as we were launching, started their program in the book space. But we're the first outfit to use this to support an ongoing program of journal publication across a wide range of titles. And it went pretty well. Over the course of those 5 years, we've had 300 universities support us, right down from small theological colleges up to the big Ivy League institutions, large institutions in the UK, and so forth. Our prices are consistently low, and we try to operate without maximal overheads, but rather a sustainability overhead on our operations. I also think that what's often overlooked in looking at our economic model is that just as a humanities publisher, we've shown the value of open access publication far more broadly. In the last year, we had 370,000 downloads of humanities articles approximately, which, given that most of my articles, when they're published in closed access publications, receive about 10 views per article, is looking like a much more sustainable way of fueling this humanities research publication culture. And I guess that's one of the things I'd say that I'm most proud of what we've achieved, is that we're starting to work towards a world where it's not just scientific publications that are openly available for anybody to read, it's the humanities work as well. So really there's an opportunity for the general public, those who've done humanities degrees, or even just those who are interested in cultures, art forms and histories, get access to scholarly material on this subject. I guess I just wanted to close by talking about the next steps that we're planning. So we've been hoping to spread this model to other publishers as far as we can. There are challenges in what we're doing. There's no incentive for a library to participate other than they support open access. But we've seen take up from other entities such as Reveal Digital, which is a crowdfunding model for digitization of archival materials, and the Subscribe to Open initiative, which has introduced a rivalrous benefit to participants in that system. In Subscribe to Open, if you don't pay in, you lose access. So that's the sort of economist's version of what we're doing that introduces a rivalrous benefit alongside the altruistic participation that we've seen. We're also broadening the media forms. We work closely with the COPIM project, which is a Research England and Arcadia Foundation funded initiative looking at open access books. Given our experience in the humanities disciplines, we really want to see that other primary media form take on economic models that can sustain this without incurring book processing charges, which are magnitudes of order larger than we see in the journal space. We also have continued journal conversion. We receive a large number of applications to join our platform every year and have to put them through a rigorous review process. So that we can ensure that we bring on high quality titles. But we're also, I think, taking on a program of what Janneke Adima has called scaling small. That is, we're now looking to talk to other publishers to get them involved and to see whether they have models that could be amenable to this type of project. I'm a little bit under time, but nobody hates you for ending early. Thank you very much, and thanks to all the other co-participants. I've really enjoyed seeing your presentation so far and looking forward to the next steps.
That's great. Thank you, Martin. And yes, bonus points for finishing a little bit early. So thanks for that. So yeah, next up then are Scholarcy, and Emma Warren-Jones and Phil Gooch are going to present. So Emma and Phil, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, David. Great, thank you. So thanks for inviting us here today. It's great to be here and on the first virtual ALPS conference. I'm Phil Gooch and I'm here with Emma Warren-Jones and we're the founders of Scholarcy. We're going to give you a quick overview of what Scholarcy does, which problems it solves and who's using the technology. So the ability to quickly read, digest and synthesize information from a wide variety of sources is a universal problem, but it's particularly acute in scholarly communication. There are many discovery tools out there, but once you've discovered the materials that you must read, the tendency then is to file those papers away to read them later. But many of these will never get read. So how do we turn the words on the page into actionable knowledge? Today, Scholarcy is being used in a wide variety of scenarios. Scholarcy Library is used by tens of thousands of students and early career researchers worldwide to understand, share, and organize research. It's used by librarians to teach information literacy, and it's used by authors to draft plain language summaries. And our API is used by content providers to improve discoverability. Now, researchers typically read around 250 papers per year, and they may spend around 40 minutes on each. They often rely on skim reading, which can result in missing the key information and also quickly forgetting the content of the papers. Patrick Joyce, founder of Research Hub, said that it normally takes him around 45 minutes to read and digest a paper. But he says that scholarcy has reduced that to 15 minutes, and it often picks up points that I may have missed on the first reading. So let's have a look at how this works. So I'm going to try a live demo here. So we have a PDF preprint, and like most preprints, it's available PDF only, which makes it difficult to read on screen because we can't do much other than scroll through it and read it sequentially. So what Scholarcy does is distill the paper into an what we call an interactive flashcard. And so now each of the sections are available to be expanded and contracted. And we can easily navigate to specific sections, so we can jump straight to the introduction, methods, discussion and conclusion if we want. So let's look at the key concepts. So one of the things that Scholarcy offers to people new to a subject is the key concepts in the paper and links to Wikipedia. So if I don't know what this term estimated glomerular filtration rate means, I can simply click on that and go to the Wikipedia page about it, where I can get some more information and background reading on this topic. The other thing that Scholarcy does is create a bullet point summary of about 5 or 6 highlights of the paper, which surfaces the key findings. It also allows us to verify the references. So we can put our mouse over a reference, which is something we can never do in a PDF file. And then we can see, using tools such as cite.ai, see if this reference has been verified or contradicted by other researchers. So this is going to go away, resolve this reference, and look up the information in another service. And being a live demo, of course, here we are. So we can see that 5 researchers have supported this paper that's referenced here, reference number 10, and only 1 person has refuted it. So this suggests that this is maybe a good quality study. And there's other things we can do, like we can actually generate a summary of the paper, cited paper itself, and get those paper's findings. And this can be useful if we want to compare what the author is saying against what the cited author actually claimed and said in their paper. And so there we go, we've summarized the key findings of reference number 10, and we can do this using our API. We can do this at scale over a large number of papers. And then the other thing we can do is find out information about study subjects. So we know there's 1,794 participants in this study, and it highlights the key findings and statistical tests and other information. And finally, if we want to know about the study limitations, we can jump straight to that section and just read and absorb that.
Another way Scholarcy's technology is being used is by universities to aid research promotion. Lay summaries are becoming more important for effective research promotion, but authors often find these difficult and time-consuming to write. Over the last year, we've seen more libraries and authors using our technology to generate draft summaries as the starting point for research promotion. And one example of that is the University of Manchester as part of its Open Access Plus initiative. The research services team there have used Scholarcy for the past year to generate plain language summaries of papers for promoting on Twitter and as the basis for content supplied to other platforms such as Kudos. This is just one example of a Twitter thread from the University of Manchester used to promote a paper on type 2 diabetes prevention programs. The 5 key takeaways generated by Scholarcy from the research have been used as content for the thread and show why the study is important, what was done as part of the research, what the authors concluded, and who funded the research. Scott Taylor, who's Research Services Manager at the University of Manchester, has said that summarization technology has helped them to promote papers at scale in a way that they wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. Content services are also using Scholarcy to quickly give readers key findings from the latest research. So all 3 of these organisations are using Scholarcy to make their content more discoverable and easier for the research community to digest. A- using Scholarcy to present headline and section summaries alongside all of its computer science open access papers. And Meta, which is part of the Chan Zuckerberg initiative, is using Scholarcy to give readers the key highlights from biomedical articles and preprints for easier comprehension. Cactus is also using our API to generate highlights and summaries for papers on its COVID-19 research platform, and also to extract key information from papers on PubSure to help editors evaluate submissions. This is an example of Scholarcy's highlights on Cactus's COVID-19 research platform. And in this case, there was no abstract available for the paper, but Scholarcy has generated a quick overview in 5 bullet points.
Great, so we've seen how Scholarcy can extract key information from papers. But how do we go from extracting information to generating and synthesizing new content? The ability to automatically synthesize a factually correct summary that generates novel sentences from an arbitrary source and not simply extracting key information is probably one of the holy grails of natural language processing. And we've recently been making some progress in this area. So we've now released our new deep learning summarization engine, which provides different summaries for different readers. So it generates a succinct summary with various levels of detail. And as you can see in the example here at the top, we've generated an expert summary that has more information and more detail about what was done and the key findings of the paper. And then we've got a 1-sentence lay summary that's been generated where we've simplified, the engine has automatically simplified some of the language. And it's also generated links to Wikipedia. So as a non-expert reader, if you don't know what white matter tractography is, you can simply click on that and you'll go to the Wikipedia page to find out more information. And we've recently been extending this content synthesis engine further to be able to work across whole collections of papers. And the idea here is it possible in future to draft a review article? Because we know that review articles are widely read and cited, but authors tend to dislike writing them, and they're very time consuming to write. And typically by the time they're published, the information in them is out of date. So if we can bring machine intelligence to help draft reviews on topics such as drug efficacy and novel treatments, this would be a very welcome development. And we're planning on rolling out such functionality later this year. Thank you very much, and thanks for listening, and thanks very much again to the judges for inviting us here today.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Phil, and thank you, Emma. That's great. Okay, so next up then we have Data Seer, and Tim Vines is going to be presenting that. So Tim, over to you.
Hi, yes. Thanks very much for having me speak here today. Here's the big problem that we're going to be tackling. Most research articles don't share their underlying data sets. And just to quantify that, here is a quote out of an article by Rohani, Farid, and Barnett. This is from the abstract. This is from they looked at data sharing in the British Medical Journal, and they found that out of 157 articles that they looked at, only 7 of those research articles shared their data sets. And this is remarkable because the BMJ, where they did this study, has a very robust, long-standing data policy, and they're also a very professional, high-standard journal. And so to only find 7 out of 157 research articles sharing their data sets is really pretty amazing. These articles can also not be verified. That means that readers can't come in and understand the results that the authors have produced because they can't see how the authors went from their data to the conclusions. And on top of that, the data can't be reused to test new hypotheses or spark new directions of research. And this undermines research at the best of times, making it hard for the community to sort the good ideas from the bad. And it greatly slows the rate of research progress. Unfortunately, in a pandemic, it's costing lives. Bad research is out there, changing policy before it gets flagged as being wrong. And meta-analyses of key pandemic questions are badly underpowered because we don't have access to the raw data. Stakeholders out there, like journals, funders, and institutions, have taken action, But and so they've made plenty of data infrastructure. There's lots of incentives and educational resources about how to share data and so on. And of course, there are policies that mandate or encourage open data. But the data infrastructure really isn't being used. Participation in the educational resources and the incentives is fairly low. And data policies are seldom enforced by the stakeholders, and they're often ignored by the authors. So they're not very effective. So overall, despite the importance of open data for tackling COVID and supporting science in general, what we're doing right now isn't working. We need a new approach. We need to move from these generally worded data sharing policies to giving specific advice for that document right now. So for example, for this particular manuscript, we need to tell authors which data sets they need to share and how to format those data sets and which repositories are most appropriate for those data sets to go in. And then we need to check that they've done it. And because we've made a list of the required data sharing actions for each article, we can bring clarity and accountability to the data sharing process. DataSea implements this approach. We're using natural language processing and machine learning, and together, because these are very powerful, we can allow this approach to operate at scale and quick and make it cheap, which is very different from using human curators to do this work. We think DataSea is going to drive big changes. It's going to make data policies much more enforceable, and that in turn will enable more stakeholders to promote data sharing because they feel better equipped to bring in data sharing policies. And that means many more articles are ultimately going to have shared data. And moreover, the data sets associated with an article are going to be more complete, better formatted, and better linked, and more discoverable. And that means that data management is going to have to improve throughout the research cycle because authors are going to have their data sets exposed either at publication or during peer review, and there's going to be less scope for bad data management. It means more research can be verified. We can check the reproducibility of articles because the data sets are available and we can rerun the analyses. Meta-analyses of key hypotheses are going to be much more powerful. Instead of relying on summary statistics that we find in the article, we can put the raw data sets together to really test questions. And new ideas can be tested with whatever data sets that are out there. And crucially, if authors are going to make the supplemental and corollary data sets available, then those sets are going to be, those data sets, the obscure ones, are often the source of surprising new insights and major new research directions. So getting all the data out there is very important. And altogether, that makes research much more useful to society. Okay, so here's how it works. So this is what the DataSea user interface looks like. Here on the left-hand panel is an XML version. This, following on from tradition in this session, I have uploaded one of my own articles here. And so here is the beginning of the methods section. And DataSea, the machine learning algorithm, has highlighted the sentences that it has detected as containing language suggesting that a data set is being collected. So this first sentence here, it is detected that we have collected sticklebacks, and that means that we have tabular data. It's detected that we have very likely have tabular data, and it's of the specific type of sample table, and it gives specific advice for sample tables, and then it gives more generic advice on how to share the tabular data. And down here, it gives most suitable repositories. This, in a few months' time, is going to become a much more dynamic recommendation tool based on the context of the article. And so I've typed in a name. This is where the authors come in. I provided a name for this data set. These fish came from Bonsall Creek. And I provided the DOI. So these data have already been shared on Dryad. So I've just copied the DOI from there and pasted it in here. And then I can just click validate. And then we move on to the next sentence, which is this sentence here, which is about the conductivity and oxygen levels in the water. And so scrolling on down the manuscript, it's found some morphological data that we've collected. It's found some genetic data down here, and there's another few genetic data sets down here. Once we click the finish button over here, we come to this screen. And this page appears, and this version is a showcase for all the different types of output that we can generate. And we can tailor the output to whatever our stakeholders need us to tailor it to. So for example, for authors, here is a suggested data availability statement for this particular article. Okay, so going back to the presentation, these are the use cases that we're working on. Authors can use DataSeer before they submit their article to a journal or to a preprint server to check that they've complied with whatever data sharing requirements apply to them. So maybe there's an institutional mandate, maybe they're going to submit to a journal with a strong data sharing policy. And that means we need to, they need to make sure they've shared all the data. So they can use DataSeer straight up and they can upload their article for free. We can also incorporate it to journal workflows. Either they can test for data sharing either at initial submission or at the acceptance of the article. And this enables journals to promote enforcement with the, promote compliance with their data sharing policy at a much higher level than is possible now just using human labor. And other stakeholders like institutions or funders can also use DataSeer to assess data sharing across a whole corpus of published articles. And one of the crucial things that DataSeer does is it first detects the number of data sets that should have been shared and works out the number of data sets that have been shared. And that enables the stakeholder to get a much clearer picture of the proportion that have been made available. So to conclude, we link data policies to the actions needed for an individual article. We go from the broadly wordly policy to the actions authors need to take right now for their particular article. And that brings clarity and accountability to the data sharing process, which is sorely needed. The DataSeer approach is simple and scalable, and we're admittedly biased, but we feel that DataSeer is going to have a huge impact. And as an analogy, Authenticate came in and enabled everybody to start detecting copy text and plagiarism, and now journals are vastly more empowered to detect plagiarism, and DataSeer is going to do the same for data policies. So thank you very much. That's all I have.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Tim. That's great. Okay, so next up then is Jus Mundi, and no, that is Latin, and I know a lot of ALPS members will be Latin scholars. I think it might even be a requirement to join nowadays. But for those that aren't fluent in Latin, I believe it translates as justice for the world or justice for all. So here to tell us a bit more about that is Jean-Rémy Demestre. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for all of you for inviting us to present Jus Mundi at this opportunity. So I know that all the people listening to us today are not Latin speaker, and you are not probably also lawyers. So I will start explaining why the legal research is different from the other academic research. So I display on the screen a classical article, which is available in a legal journal. And I want you to focus on the part which is below the line, the references in this article. The particularity for legal research is that you have two big categories of references. The first one, which is highlighted in yellow on my screen, these are the secondary sources, and basically these are references to other articles of journals, of books, etc. The particularity in the legal sphere is that you have another category of sources, the ones that are showing on my screen, which is the primary sources. And in the law, the primary sources, these are, the legal documents. So basically the law, the treaties, and the jurisprudence. And most of what you see on the screen are jurisprudence, so decisions of tribunals. all these documents are part of the legal system, and the role of the academics in the legal sphere is to describe the state of the law and to explain it to the world, etc., etc. When you work on your articles, you need to have access to these primary sources, and in the international legal sphere, the access to the primary sources is very complicated. Why is the first reason you can guess? It's because this data is scattered all over the world. There are some international sources which are handled by international institutions, but each of them are independent, and so it's very complicated to access this data. And when it comes, to the national laws and national cases in every state, of course, they are dispersed in every state. So accessing the law is very complicated. Then, of course, there is the quality of the data, which is very different depending on which state and which institution you are talking about. There are many PDFs that are not really easily accessible, and there is not even real data sets that you can exploit. And finally, the last barrier is a language barrier. If you are an English-speaking lawyer, you will not be able to access data in languages that you do not speak. And today, when you are an international lawyer or academic in the international sphere, you need to speak many languages to access this data. The question that you are maybe asking yourself is why this problem matter, beyond the mere sphere of international legal researcher. The thing is that the legal system, which is composed of these primary sources, is important to all of us, because today it allows people to have international relationships. So, if you marry with someone and you decide to divorce, this is an international relationship. States between themselves, they have these relationships, companies, etc., etc. And the international legal system, to be reliable, it needs to be transparent. And lawyers, they need to have access to the law. And today, there is none of these values which is actually working for the international legal system. And the consequence of this absence of transparency and accessibility is that the international rule of law is very weak. So, the rule of law is the fact that we have rules which are accessible to everyone and that will be applied by everyone and enforced in the same way against all of us. And you just have to look at the state of the world to realize that the international rule of law is something which is very weak at the time. And one of the reasons is this absence of accessibility and this lack of transparency. So how do we tackle this issue at Usmundi? We built a unique solution, which is first to build the data set. So we basically collect this legal knowledge from all over the world. We structure this data, we OCR the documents, etc. And we extract automatically all the important information in these documents. Then we built a multilingual search engine that will allow a lawyer to search from English or French and to get results in any languages. Like as you see on my screen, you can get results in Russian. And finally, it's using artificial intelligence to interconnect all these documents. Because every legal document is interconnected with other legal documents, and it is very important for lawyers to be able to navigate easily through these documents in order to make sense of the international legal system. Doing it manually is totally impossible, and so we built algorithms that are able to do that automatically. And now I will show you directly the platform for you to better understand what we do, to see what we do, and also I will present what we plan to do after. So what you see on my screen is a classical international jurisprudence, so this is a PDF, 100 pages, very bad quality, etc., etc. And after collecting all these documents, we transform them, in this format with all the metadata which are extracted. And a good quality document with a table of content to navigate inside the document, etc. I want to insist on one point. We have a very unique model at Jusmundi because, you know, all legal research provider, they keep all the data that they collect for themselves, but at Jusmundi, we make that freely available to everyone. So the document that you see actually on my screen, you can see it without any subscription to Jusmundi. And we do that with all the data that we gather at Jusmundi. You can see also that we implement hyperlinks inside the document. So this is the interconnection I was talking about, which is done by artificial intelligence. So you can click and access to another document, and, you know, from a document you can also click and access to the other documents which are referring to this document. So this is, you know, especially helpful when you have documents in any languages and you want to access them very easily. I want also to show you quickly how it works our search engine, and especially the multilingual functionality. So, you know, if I search a term like dual nationality, users of Jusmundi, they can find classical results where, you know, dual nationality is found as such, but they will also get results that do not contain dual nationality, the keywords, but they contain the concept of dual nationality. And, you know, they can find this data also thanks to our artificial intelligence, and it will help them to go beyond their own language and to find relevant results in other languages. Okay. So now I want to tell you quickly what we plan to do for the future, and I will start with one project that we just launched, which is called Wikinotes, and the purpose of this knowledge, you know, is to make the legal knowledge easily accessible for people who do not know already, because when you know what you are looking for, you go in a search engine, but when you don't know, you need some guidance. So we built this encyclopedia, basically, of international law. So it's focused on one topic on this moment, and you can, you know, search for a note, and you will have access to a note which has been written by an academic. I will open it in full page. A note which has been written by an academic or by a lawyer from all over the world, and we really work with people from everywhere. And you will know, you know, what is this legal concept, and you will have access to the legal references here by clicking on the footnote. You know, once again, this note, so all this knowledge is freely available to anyone, so you can find them on Google, etc., etc. And the last point I want to highlight, so I go back on the document. So this is, you know, jurisprudence, Plana versus Bulgaria, and outside there are many secondary sources that I presented at the beginning, which are hosted by publishers today, and these secondary sources are also very complicated to access for lawyers because they are in different platforms, and you know, the quality of the legal research is not the best. So what we plan to do is to use the algorithm that I presented, you know, to interconnect the documents, to interconnect our documents with the journals, books, etc., which are hosted on the publisher platform, so we can you know, allow the users to easily go from one platform to another, etc. And this will be easily possible with this algorithm because it identifies, you know, the legal references inside also the journals which are hosted on these platforms. So this is all for, you know, a brief discovery of our platform. I want also I want to thank you once again for your invitation. It's really a pleasure to present before you and to also listen to the other presentation.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jean-Remy. Very, very good. Thank you for that. Okay, so our final presentation this afternoon then is Rigor and Transparency Index powered by SciScore, and it's over to Anita Brandrowski and Martijn Rosland. So over to you.
Hi, thank you so much for the invitation to be here. We're very pleased. So I'm Anita Brandrowski, and I'm the CEO of SciScore. And today we'll be talking about the Rigor and Transparency Index. Next slide. So the reproducibility crisis in biomedicine is something that I think most people here are probably aware of. And this slide, if you are aware of it, this particular figure here on the right-hand side is really important because it tries to put a number on some of the reproducibility problems. And today we'll be talking about just the first two. So the two major problems with reproducibility are reagents, which I'll cover in the next slide, and the study design. And things in the study design are aspects of research where essentially the researchers themselves are sort of fooling themselves because, believe it or not, research scientists are just like other humans, and they actually have the same kinds of problems as education has faced and other fields have faced for many years in terms of being able to fool myself. I can fool myself into thinking that I have a better result, a bigger result. In fact, that was quantified in Malcolm McLeod's lab. And if you look at a properly controlled study here using randomization, but also blinding and other aspects that you can actually work on to make the study better, right? You fool yourself less when you're blinded. That is why we have clinical trials that do that. But when you look at studies in the preclinical sphere that are actually properly randomized, properly blinded, the effect sizes are much smaller. So one of the issues with clinical trials failing might be that the effects were never really significant to begin with. So what we can do is we can actually make our studies better. Next slide. If you look at reagents, we actually have in 2014 started a pilot project that was a 3-month pilot. Now it's ongoing and it's spread to over 1,000 journals in biomedicine preclinical work, which largely solves the reagent problem. A reagent identification is one of the main issues. So I say I used reagent X. It's like an ingredient in a recipe. No one else can find that ingredient because I haven't used enough information around that ingredient in order to be able to find it. And so what we do is we ask the author to go and look up a number. Like you can see here in this research portal, an author is searching for this 15C4. That's a piece of identifying information, and that is a cell line that they're using. And it just so happens that then they have to put in this RRID. You can see that, cite this information here, and they put that in the paper, and remarkably enough, what happens is they're able to identify more of the reagents, in fact, going from 50% to 90%. But when you look at cell lines, and this particular reagent, this 15C4, also has a comment. It's a problematic cell line. This has been contaminated, shown to be a HeLa derivative. So this is a reagent that is bad. And these reagents that are bad do prevail all throughout the literature, and they muddy up the literature. And when we ask authors to go to one place and ask the question, can you please go look up this number, and give no additional information about contaminated cell lines or anything else, it turns out that that actually cleans the literature greatly. So in these 634 example papers where authors used an RRID, the prevalence of use of contaminated or otherwise problematic cell lines has gone way, way down. And in fact, some of these cell lines can be safely used. So these 5% of papers are actually using those. Next slide, please. So why are we here? Why is the reagent problem actually not completely solved? Well, it turns out that making papers better just takes a lot of staff time. Next slide. So we built an AI tool to help actually solve this problem. So SciScore is a series of about 40 different algorithms working in concert. There is a huge set of lookup tables for reagents. There are various kinds of classifiers, including neural networks, standard named entity recognitions, parts of speech, sentence diagramming. All of those things are being used in concert to create a set of reports. Next slide. And this is what one of those reports looks like. So literally you can go into sciscore.com today, log in using your ORCID, and paste your methods section into the tool, and magically you get back this report. So this report contains a lot of things like the Institutional Review Board statement. It contains randomization statement, blinding, power analysis. These are all of the rigor criteria that I mentioned that are hallmarks of a good study. And then there's a reagent table. So all of these different reagents, we pick up various problems, including the reagent not having the right identifier, because there's a large lookup table in the background. There are organisms that are listed. Now, if the tool finds a matching sentence, it basically gives a +1 point. And if it doesn't find a matching sentence or a matching piece of information, then it does not give that +1 point. And it counts how many things the author has addressed and how many things they have not addressed, and gives a final number between 1 and 10. So basically, the RTI, actually, go ahead, Martin. Sorry.
Yeah. So what Anita showed, SciScore can run on the website, but it's now also integrated in journal submission platforms such as eJournal Press and in the next version of Editorial Manager. And then you can use it in your submission workflow. However, we also got thinking, if we can do this, how do the scores look like if we would run this every paper in biomedicine across our tool? And so this is where the rigor and transparency index comes in. So basically the index is an average score of average size score across a selection of articles, for example, per journal per year. And so we took the PubMed Central open access subset, which is 1.6 million papers across more than 4,000 journals. And we analyzed all the materials and methods in those. What you can see on the left panel is that the RTI, so the average size score per journal, across these journals actually started around 2 and climbed slowly across the past 20 years to a 4.2 on a scale between 1 and 10. We can also see the various rigor components that Anita mentioned earlier. And you can see that across all these 1.6 million papers, the power analysis and blinding were addressed in only 10% of the paper, which is really, really low. Whereas sex as a biological variable and randomization was growing up to 30 and 25 and 35%. On the other side, we've zoomed into the antibody identification over time. You see it was very low. 10% of the antibodies could be uniquely identified in papers at the end of the last century, and it grew up to 40%. We've zoomed in for a couple of journals, and 2 of them, OncoTarget and PLOS ONE, have put this as a requirement in their instruction for authors. So the authors should identify antibodies, but as most publishers know, none of the authors reads instructions for authors, so there's no effect. eLife and Cell, on the other hand, they have standards and checklists to improve the antibody identification. You see they really go up within the time span of 2 years to nearly 100%, which is really remarkable. We can also look at across journals with this metric, and we can identify the efficacy of pilots. So here on the right side, you see a given journal, publisher, a subset of their papers, and we can see the average size score, the RTI, that they have. This is the average of all articles, the 4.2 that I mentioned earlier. And you can see that some of the journals are underperforming. So as a publisher, you can look into those and wonder why your antibody journal has a very low score. On the other side, you can also see we have run a pilot with the British Journal of Pharmacology for over a year now. They were the very first ones to test it. And you can see that within 1 year, the RTI actually jumps up to a score over 6, showing the efficacy of the improvement of rigor and transparency. We can also zoom into some of the rigor aspects of a particular journal. So this is the case of Nature, and Nature implemented a checklist between 2013 and 2015, and as a result of that, on average, you see that the majority of the scores go up. So the SCI score goes up to about 4 and a bit. The randomization increases, sex as a biological variable, and blinding and percentage of antibody identifiable all go up as a result of a checklist. So you can see that actually what the average you've put in actually pays out. So looking back, what are the USPs for the RTI? So we make we make the reproducibility of science measurable, thereby saving research funding. We help publishers and editors to assess the reproducibility of their journals, saving time and effort. And we advise editors where to focus their efforts to improve their journal, empowering the editors and reviewers. On the right side, you see the team of SciScore, and SciScore is a product of SciCrunch. We'll leave you with this nice note that we got from a counselor of a US university who asked, when hearing about this RTI, did you check how MIT is doing in your analysis of average RTIs? I bet they are worse than we are. And that's pretty much where we are. We have a couple of things coming up, but do follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn and you'll find out.
Thank you so
That's
much.
all.
Great. Thank you very much, Anita, and thank you, Martijn. Okay, so that takes us to the end of our sessions this afternoon. Thank you very much to all of our presenters for joining us and presenting so well. Thank you to Leslie for all of the back-end support and making the awards run so smoothly, and to Chloe for all of her help making it all run smoothly technically as well. You will have to wait just over a week to find out who has won. So join us next Wednesday at 6:30 UK time. It's the evening in the UK, so you could have a glass of wine with you, perhaps, if you want to, not if you're presenting. And I can reveal that actually this year we have more than one winner. There is not a single winner, there is more than one winner. So I will say more about that next week, but join us on Wednesday to find out who has won. And with that, thank you all very much. And I'll now hand back over to Wayne to wrap it up. So thank you.
Thank you, David, and to all our finalists for such an interesting session. This was a great way to start the conference. Thanks also to all of you who've joined us today. I hope you've enjoyed the presentations and have registered your place for the winners announcement next Wednesday, where you'll be able to hear from our keynote speaker, Sherry Aldis, and her presentation, The Sustainable Development Goals, What Do They Mean for Scholarly Publishing and Research in COVID-19 World? For more information and registration details, please head to our conference website. Thanks again, stay safe, and have a good evening.